Creating a classroom that is multiculturally sensitive takes work and experience. My first step is always understanding the demographics of my students and being open to changes in those understandings. Put in that way, it sounds so technical and definitely takes more than me giving my students a survey that asks them about their identity. Understanding the demographics of my students involves engaging early on in discussions that might be out of their comfort zone. For example, last year, for the first day of class, I took my 9th grade students to Fort Baird. We had a historian give us a presentation on the history of the fort, which included how they defended it from the local Apache tribes. After he left, I had my students read an excerpt from a book about Apache being taken as slaves and raised in white Hispanic households. After the reading, I asked my students to reflect on the two very different histories presented to us. After reflecting, students were then open to sharing personal histories of struggle that related to their own cultural backgrounds, and I started my work as understanding their cultural diversity. It is important to note that having a rough picture of my students' cultural identities does not equate understanding how different cultures learn. I feel confident that with resources within this book and those I have access to, if I were presented with a culturally challenging situation, I'd be able to seek help in figuring out how a specific student learns. In this chapter, Howard Gardner talks about multiple intelligences in relation to cultural identity. As an overarching rule of thumb, he concludes that if students are A, presented with an individualized education as often as possible, and B, allowed to be taught ideas and concepts in multiple formats, they will be more likely to understand the information. In addition, giving students choice on how they want to tackle a task creates a more culturally sensitive classroom, where students are growing in many different intelligences. I prefer to give students choice through place-based education. When students are taught concepts using their own neighborhoods or natural areas as the focus, they are more likely to find meaning in that lesson. Place-based education is a way to teach about multiple cultures in multiculturally sensitive ways, and provides meaningful feedback for both teacher and school. One topic I did not feel was adequately touched on in this chapter was the role of administrators in providing training and making sure the school was being held to similar standards for multiculturalism. There are many administrative tasks that can be jarring when dealing with culturally diverse parents. And having multiculturally sensitive school means that all school personnel are adequately trained, not just the teacher.